Hi everyone, welcome to this interview by Core Recruitment. Thank you very much for joining us today. Core, if you're not aware, is a recruitment company. We specialize in mid to senior level across leisure, fitness and hospitality. We're very excited to be running this interview series, and there's a mixture of articles and videos that we've been putting out there in the universe to promote some positivity into the sectors that we operate across. Now, we're really pleased today to be speaking to Marc Diaper, who we've known for a long time. And when we talk about positivity, positive mental attitude, and somebody who's very can-do, I think he's very much top of the list. How are you, Marc?
Hi, Christian. I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for the invite as well.
No, you're very welcome. So in case somebody does literally live down a dark hole, can you tell us a little bit about Fitness First as a business and to get started off?
Yeah, of course, no worries. So Fitness First has been around for over 30 years now. So founded in 1993. The business was originally founded and opened in Bournemouth, down on the south coast. Grew to a business with over 350 sites, 17 countries. And then over the last sort of 10 years or so, each territory is now owned independently. So the UK now is owned by the Whelan family, who have 26 sites across the UK.
Excellent. Now, when I was first got to London, I was a member at Fitness First, and it was kind of like this dark box underneath kind of like Liverpool Street Station. Just had like lots of kind of like city boys who were down there grunting away doing weights all the time. And like that, I'm lucky to say that was like 20 years ago. And I think gyms have actually moved on quite a lot since then. I guess just in terms of that premiumization, can you just talk us through what you've been doing with Fitness First and also kind of like a little bit about kind of like, how that's been going?
Yeah, sure. So I've been here for 7 months now. So took a bit of time out post gym box, did a bit of consultancy work, and then, you know, had a call from Scott, who's the chairman here, and we met up for a few beers and a conversation around where fitness is going. And Scott bought into my ideas, fortunately, which landed me in Fitness First, which I would have never said 2 years ago I'd be sat at Fitness First, to be honest. So I think where we're going, premiumization is the right word. However, we have 26 sites across the country. So we have 18 in London, and then we have areas like Wigan and Bangor in North Wales, St Albans, Milton Keynes. It's all very different. So premiumization definitely is the right word. And, you know, it's probably more to it than just that, though. I think there's a bit of a buzzword at the moment around sort of wellness and longevity and premiumization. So I pulled together sort of what I call 9 big moves. So 9 things we're focusing on, you know, from me starting 7 months ago all the way through for the next 18 months or so. And premiumization is one of those for sure, but I think it's more about market positioning. So for me, you know, Fitness First, LA Fitness were the original, I'd say mid-market operators, right? Because there was no real budget operator back in those days. And then you had the premium operators still. So, you know, a Sporter, you know, David Lloyd, etc. So where I want to take this business to now is not just a modernization of the actual estate, which we're doing for sure. And we're seeing, you know, the last 6 months, we've done 4 refurbs and seen great results post refurb, which is fantastic, but more about where fitness is going. So, you know, we want to be the best value proposition. So we're not the cheapest, we're not super premium, but we still set in that area where we talk about value, not about being mid-market. Okay, so our price point can range from £49 a month in Wigan to £200 a month in the city. Okay, but in Wigan, we'd still be seen as more of a premium operator because you've got your JDs and they're at £29.99. So definitely more premium as an overall offering, but it's more about the value we offer. So things like, you know, building niche communities, so clubs in clubs, running clubs, lifting clubs, conditioning clubs, for example. Looking at hyper-personalization, data-led programming using AI, looking at longevity for sure. We've partnered with Health more recently, and we're offering a 360 membership. So, you know, you get your classic membership, you get Classic Plus, which gives you access to classes early and a few other benefits. And then you've got your 360, which is if you want to go into your blood testing and your diagnostics, and you want to have a nutrition one-to-one, you want to have a on-demand GP, on-demand physios, you can go down that route as well. So we've got 9 big moves. That's just a couple of them that we're now focusing on across the next 18 months to reposition the brand of where we want to put it.
Definitely moved on quite some way since that dark box under Liverpool Street Station, Mark. I'm definitely going to say. So, we know you from Gymbox. I think a lot of the people in the sector know you from Gymbox as well because you were Gymbox. I mean, you were totally like the personification of that brand. How's it been from a personal level, moving into kind of like, a different business and taking ownership of that instead?
Yeah, I think that I spent nearly 15 years at Gymbox. So, when we sold the business back in October 24, it was quite a culture shock. I think I lasted a day actually before I was on a work phone call, to be honest. So it's kind of I didn't get too far away from working side of things, but took a few months out. And as I say, I did some consultancy work for a brand called Until. You may have heard of Until in the city. Really forward-thinking, young startup. Help them on their sort of structure to their growth they want to achieve over the next couple of years. And then I landed up at Fitness First. As I said earlier, Scott gave me a call. We had a couple of beers and we talked about where I thought fitness was going. And I see Fitness First as the most iconic UK fitness brand. I have to say, when I was at Gymbox, Gymbox was very, very different back then. It was, as you know, you've used Gymbox before, unique, in your face kind of marketing, very brash, very out there, but also from a product perspective, kind of best in class. So, we always said, we weren't vanilla, not wooden floors, not white walls, live DJs, a fun environment. And lots of PR around the brand, which has obviously stopped in the last 12, 18 months because, when leadership changes, when brand and marketing changes, obviously Rory moved on, things change. But I saw an opportunity with Fitness First to take this kind of iconic UK brand, which I think to the consumer or some consumers and the industry, there's thoughts of it losing its way. And actually, when I came on board, I was really pleasantly surprised by the community. Fitness First has got thousands of members that have been here from day one. It's got a very, very tight community. So the opportunity I saw with Fitness First was to say, okay, look, if this is where we're at now, if we now introduce these 9 big moves, as I call them, we look around premiumization, we look at niche communities, we look at AI, we look at longevity, we look at recovery, we look at social well-being. So, more in that market, what could we create? And actually, all we're trying to move the needle by here is by 10, 15%, because actually we've got clubs now that have come close to waiting lists. So, it was an opportunity really to take this kind of future vision of where fitness is going and apply it to a brand that's already got iconic status. And when I got into the first few marketing campaigns, working alongside Lee here in sort of brand and marketing with us and the agencies we're now using, it became very evident. Everyone said, you guys are famous. You're the most famous UK brand. Let's make you more relevant to more people now. That was the kind of key driver for us was, how do we go and attract Gen Z? They're shaping the future of where fitness is going. How can we get more market share in that area, for example? How can we change our tone of voice? We looked at a new brand onion for the business, which was great. We've got the whole team involved in a new brand onion. So doing what I did at Gymbox effectively in Fitness First for the first few months.
Amazing. Now, from a consumer and from a customer kind of like perspective, there's been lots of different challenges with remote working, visit frequency, that kind of side of things. What trends have you seen in the last year?
Yeah, look, I think we're still talking about pandemic, which is crazy, 5, 6 years on, right? But I think the pandemic shocked everyone in terms of how quickly cities would bounce back, for sure. Now, I know in Europe and across the world, it bounced back a lot quicker than London. And 18 of our sites are in London. So 18 to 26 are in London. So it was definitely not the hockey stick return everyone assumed it was going to be post-COVID. And it still varies by area. Some of our areas are well over 100% of pre-pandemic numbers, some slightly under. And actually, it all falls within the footfall of the stations in that area. That's kind of how it falls. Now, the TfL publish their data on the stations and footfall. We can link that very closely to membership. And we track a little bit ahead of where those numbers would be. So I think it's the norm now. 3-4 days a week in the office seem to be where most businesses are at. You've got some out there at 5 days and, made it mandatory for 5 days. You've got some that are complete remote, but majority now 3 or 4 days. So, and actually our average usage per member is actually up. So, again, what you find post-pandemic is, when we went into the first lockdown, we had to freeze everyone's membership. which meant communicating with every single member we have. Now, you had a whole host of people that were dormant and not using clubs, right? So the sleepers in there. So COVID got rid of all those sleepers now. So your membership base are way more active than they used to be overall.
And then I guess from kind of like the demographic, which is really driving growth at the moment, because everybody's talking about Gen Z, Gen Z, Gen Z, kind of all the time. Is that really kind of like, from a membership perspective, like, where you're seeing the growth, or are there other demographics that are getting involved as well?
We're actually seeing growth across all areas. I think when you grow your membership base and you do a refurb of a club, for example, so we've done several refurbs now across the last year, and you see a growth across all demographics post refurb. But we are definitely seeing more women, because the old fitness first, I mean, you mentioned at the start here actually about a club that was underground, a bit dark. And well, actually these refurbs are the opposite to that. So as soon as we've done a refurb, we've seen a bounce in the amount of women joining us, which is fantastic. We're introducing concepts now like Reformer Pilates. Again, it drives, 90% of the class is female. So again, that drives more women into our business as well. And Gen Z. So, we've recently partnered with Gymshark for Gymshark Conditioning Club in our London Bridge Club. And what we found there is we've, spent a lot of money refurbing the club. We've made it way more appealing, more friendly in its feel and its look, and everything else goes with it. We've changed our music policy, which has been fantastic. And actually, again, that class is probably 80% women. So, we're appealing to the young demographic through partnerships, partnering with Health, partnering with Gymshark. We're looking at a imminent partnership on our running club. We've got a lifting club. We've got a women's lifting club that introduced. We've got conditioning clubs. So we're changing our programming. We're changing our marketing. We're changing our approach. We're changing our club design, which all links to attracting a certain demographic. But overall, we've seen growth in all areas on demographics.
Excellent. Now, price sensitivity is obviously on everybody's kind of like list at the moment. So what are you seeing kind of like, regarding that? And also, I guess, is there kind of like a difference between London and the rest of the UK in terms of kind of like what your trend you're noticing?
Yeah, I mean, pricing is really important. And as I said before, I think for us, it's more about the value proposition rather than the price. If we're starting to add recovery and we're having cold plunges and saunas and spa areas, contrast therapy and all the things that we're putting into our clubs now, you'll see that as great value for money, because, most people come to the gym still for fitness. Now, that could be a whole variety of goal related fitness, both physical and mental. Okay. That's the majority of people coming to the gym. So if you're investing in your clubs, we're seeing very, very little pushback on price post refurbs. And of course, we've got to be sensible here. We've got an estate of 26 clubs, and we've done work to about 12 of them so far. We've got a whole rollout of refurbs coming up. So look, I think the consumer sees, if you're investing in the product, you're investing in the right things in the product, people are willing to pay a premium for that, for sure. And I use my son as an example. So my son's 22, he's actually 22 today. So he now uses gyms very, very different to what I would have used gyms 30 years ago. Okay, so he'll go to one gym for his strength, and he'll go to another gym for his recovery, because they have the right, amenities for him. That would never happen when I was younger. And he's still going out and he still drinks, but he'll drink once a month. We come home with a hangover once a month. And let's be honest, Christian, when we were younger, we'd come home with a hangover 3 times a week. So I think there's a real shift in spend. There's a real shift in wellness, and people wanting to look after themselves, and a big shift towards recovery and sleep, and there's more awareness and education. So I wouldn't say there's so much pricing sensitivities personally, if you've got the right value proposition. And you mentioned between cities, of course, London, in London, we can charge £120 to £200 a month for the tier 1 clubs we've got. In Wigan, we could be 49, in Bangor, we could be 49, in, Solihull, we could be 49, for example. But we're still seeing them as probably the more premium in those areas. So we've not seen any sort of pushback on sort of price increases if we're constantly evolving the product.
And as you're evolving, kind of like what training styles are you seeing that are being the most popular? And I guess, is that regionalized as well? Because is it strength? Is it small PT classes like Pilates, mobility? What trends are you noticing?
Yeah, we're not seeing it regionalized in terms of the trends. So strength is huge. Strength now forms our kind of major pillar of all of our clubs. So, the reduction of the cardio floor has been reducing for a long time now, and strength's taken over. So strength and functional areas, absolutely. The rise of things like high rocks, there's high rocks, there's affects, there's metrics now. There's plenty of those out there now as well. So again, more demand towards that kind of training. And then a big shift into recovery. So I said earlier, your plunge pools, your recovery boots, recovery areas, more sauna based, and recovery classes as such, effectively, into things like reformer, which are many years ago, there's no way you'd be doing 6 to 10 classes a day in your timetable of one type of class, with waiting lists of 50. But that's where we're at now with reformer as well. And then there's clubs in clubs. For us, there's a demand for clubs in clubs. So it could be Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it could be boxing, it could be running, it could be lifting, conditioning, wherever it might be. We're seeing those communities are really popular. So again, we're going to lean into that with our future clubs as well.
Nice. Now, you alluded a little bit to this already, but well-being, mental health, stress management, in those kind of spaces specifically, like what are you doing, and have you got any specific corporate or kind of like, partnerships that have set up already?
Yeah, so we're looking at the moment. It's one area I've got to say. So in our sort of group X timetable, it's the one area where we are looking to make big changes. Yes, there's conditioning classes, lifting classes, and we'll be putting 15, 20 a week per club on of those. That's the plan long term. But actually, the other side of it, we're launching a breathwork class with Les Mills. We'll be looking at more sleep therapy for sure. We're looking at integrating sleep into our app. So, our members can get support at home as well as in club as well. So that's one area for the next 12 months is part of our strategy, is to drive very hard. Along with things like, mental health talks, so we can bring guest speakers into our clubs and go on to the days where it's just being, hardcore fitness studios. This is about educating members as well on things like sleep, on mental well-being, etc. as well. So it's an area probably across the next 12 months we'll focus on a hell of a lot more.
Excellent. And then in terms of, this is an area which I think is affecting society more than a lot of people realize, but there's like over 2 million people in the UK that are now on weight loss jabs. Are they going to the gym more, or does that mean less gym visits? How do you think this is going to affect you guys kind of moving forward?
I see this as a huge opportunity, always have. I look at this, and I did my personal training qualifications in like 1998, right? And somebody taught me back then that, whatever works for someone works for them. There's so many people that have opinions on what you should and what you shouldn't do. And I understand that you've got experts out there that, will go down their route. It was bloods before, it was gut health, and everyone's got their opinion on how it works. My view is on this is that our sector has got a huge opportunity to access now 2 million people. And by the way, a year ago, that was 1 million, right? It's growing quickly. Access 2 million people that are now losing weight, feeling better about themselves, feeling more confident, and need to do strength training, because as part of the GLP-1s, or any weight loss drugs out there, you'll see now the importance of doing strength training alongside it. So I see this as a huge opportunity. And I don't think it'll be long, by the way, that you'll see gyms prescribing the drug, but only if you take part in exercise, strength training exercise, or exercise in general. I can see that happening for sure, because Boots are selling it, right? So I can see at some stage this happening, and it became okay, look, we can prescribe these, but here's the program you have to do with it, and you have to be on this program if you're taking these as well. So I see it as a huge opportunity for the future, for sure, and don't see it as a risk to people going, well, I don't need to use gyms now, I'll just use drugs. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess kind of like clean slates, if you were starting a gym business or a fitness business from zero in the UK right now, where would it be? What would it be? What would you be targeting?
This will be giving all my secrets away, Christian, because we've we've got a couple of offers in at the moment on some sites in the city, actually. Some of them big, 35,000 square foot. And the future of where I think fitness is going will be in those sites. So, but look, it's going to be along the lines of co-working being part of that experience, right? So, gone are the days that people just want to pop in now for a 45-minute session and get out the door. Now, it happens, by the way. for sure. And I said before, majority of members still use us for fitness, but there's definitely a market there for people that will dwell longer. We just put our first fuel bar into Baker Street, so we now do 6 different types of smoothies and juices and coffees, and there's a small seating area, very, very small. But again, we'll go much larger with this. We're talking 2, 3, 4,000 square foot of this sort of space. So social areas for members as well. Building the best value. Again, for me, it's not about being the most premium. It's not about being budget necessarily. It's about building the best value for money experience, and that's what I would build still, for sure. Build niche communities. So I'd have everything. I'd have boxing, Muay Thai, BJJ, running, conditioning. I'd probably move away from the more conventional type classes and go more to the kind of community-based classes, for sure. Personalization, data-led programming using AI. So we introduced here about a year ago, driven it really hard across the last 6 months, BioAge. So, you've got your age, your birthday age, and then you've got your BioAge, how old your body actually is. And we do testing on that now. So again, rather than going online and offering 3-day trials, which most gyms do, we offer you to come in and get your BioAge tested. Now, we'll look at your metabolic age, we'll look at your flexibility age, we'll look at your strength age, we'll look at your cardio age. Overall gives you an age, and it's eye-opening, Christian. And honestly, I did it myself, and I did the strength test and felt quite good about myself. Then I did my flexibility test, and I've got flexibility of an old man. So it gave me a focus of where I need to work. Then it spits out at the end of that a personalized program for you based upon your skill level and your goals now moving forward based off the BioAge. So again, a lot more personalization around that. Same with nutrition and sleep and everything else goes with it as well. Definitely, we're building the gym of the future for Gen Z, because they shape the future of where we're going. Again, I said earlier about my son. He was into this a long time ago. It's not in the last 6 months he's got into this, right? And everyone's starting to move now. So I think they'll shape the future of where it goes, for sure. Big strength training areas. I think corporate wellness is also a massive opportunity. For me, corporate post-pandemic, come back to the office, you'll know yourself, you had to do more to bring people back in. And the premium office space now in London specifically is in demand. The mid-market space is not, because people want to offer more. The same with the wellness packages. It's not about just giving a corporate discount anymore. So, okay, how can I help you in your workforce train more, do the right things, have a balance between recovery and exercise and sleep and whatever else goes with it. So yeah, I think for me, I'd build all of that into the gym of the future, which you might see coming sometime soon from us if we get these sites over the line.
That sounds very, very, very exciting, Mark. Thank you for being so open. I imagine your BioAge is probably about 23, right? So
I wish, Christian, I wish. No, I wish. Yeah, I don't give too much away about my age, but my strength was good. My strength was 15 years below my age. My flexibility was way above it. So yeah, there was no celebrations on my BioAge for sure.
All right, fine. I mean, there's hope for the rest of us, Mark. I'm leaving it on that point, that there is hope for the rest of us. Thanks very much for having a chat.
No worries. Thanks, Christian. Cheers.